You have seen the list: truck drivers, radiologists, paralegals, translators, customer support, illustrators. Some version of it turns up every few months, slightly reshuffled, always with a number attached and always with a date by which it will have happened. The list is mostly wrong, not because these systems are weaker than advertised. They are not. It is wrong because it is built out of the wrong unit. I want to give you a better one. It is not a comforting frame, and by the end you may find it more uncomfortable than the list, because it applies to you specifically rather than to a category you can decide you are not in. But it has the advantage of matching what actually happens. Here is the problem with the list. It treats a job as a single thing that either survives or does not. Jobs are not single things. A job is a bundle of tasks that happen to be convenient to hand to one person. Think about your own week, not your title, the actual activities. Some of your time goes to producing the thing you are nominally paid to produce, but a great deal of it goes to deciding what should be produced, chasing information that exists but not where it should, sitting in a meeting where the real output is that 6 people now hold the same picture, handling the case that does not fit the process, explaining a decision to someone who was not there when it was made, judging whether something is finished. That bundle was not designed. It accumulated because these things all needed doing, and it was practical for one person to do them. Automation does not act on the bundle. It acts on individual tasks inside it. And a profession only disappears if very nearly all of its tasks go at once, which is rare, because the bundle is usually more varied than the job title suggests. So the useful question is not which jobs are at risk. It is which tasks are, and how many of yours are that kind. There are 3 properties. A task is exposed when it has all 3, and mostly safe when it is missing one. The first is that it is self-contained. Everything needed to do it arrives with the task. You do not have to know what was decided in a meeting last March, or that this particular client is difficult, or that the numbers from one department are always late and always optimistic. That kind of surrounding context is the least visible thing you carry and the hardest to hand over. It is also why the same task can be automatable in one organization and not in another. The second property is that it repeats at volume, not that it is simple, that it happens many times in a similar shape. Volume matters because it is what makes automation worth building. A task you do twice a year is safe almost regardless of how mechanical it is, simply because nobody will spend the effort. This is why the boring parts of specialized professions survive far longer than people expect. The third property is that being wrong is cheap, and that you can tell you were wrong quickly. Either the error does not cost much, or it is caught immediately by someone who was going to look anyway. This one does most of the work, and it is the one the list always forgets. It is not about how hard the task is. It is about what happens when it fails and how fast you find out. Now take those 3 and go back to the list. Radiology is the case worth dwelling on because it was the flagship prediction. In 2016, one of the most respected figures in the field said, publicly, that we should stop training radiologists, that within 5 or 10 years deep learning would simply do it better. The technical part of that prediction was not wrong. Reading a scan for a specific finding is close to an ideal task for these systems. It is self-contained. It happens at enormous volume, and there is a correct answer. Radiologists did not disappear. There are more of them now, and in many places they are in short supply. What the prediction got wrong was the bundle. Reading images is one task inside the job. The rest of it includes deciding which scan to order and why, performing image-guided procedures with a needle in your hand, working out what to do when the scan is ambiguous, and the patient's history points the other way, talking to the doctor who ordered it, and carrying the liability when the call is wrong. And the third property fails badly here. A missed finding is not cheap, and you may not learn about it for a year. So even the task that was automated did not get handed over. It got a second reader that never gets tired, whose output a person still signs. Meanwhile, the volume of scans kept climbing, a tool that makes each read faster in a field where demand outruns supply does not reduce the number of people. It absorbs backlog. Now the other case, because it is the same test with the opposite result. Medical transcription. Somebody listens to a doctor's dictation and types it into a record. That work has largely gone, quietly, without headlines, over roughly the same period. Run the three properties. Self-contained. Yes, the audio arrives and nothing else is needed. Volume. Enormous all day, every day. Cheap and fast to check. Yes, because the doctor reads it afterwards anyway, and a mistake surfaces immediately and gets corrected on the spot. 3 out of 3, it went. Notice what this cuts across. Transcription was not less skilled than radiology in some absolute sense. Medical transcription requires real vocabulary and real judgment about garbled audio, and it was not more routine in the way people usually mean. Which brings me to the distinction I want you to drop, because it is the one almost everyone reaches for. Creative versus routine. It does not predict anything. Producing a competent illustration to a brief is creative by any normal use of the word, and it has all three properties. Restocking a specific warehouse shelf is about as routine as work gets, and it survives because the physical world is full of surprises, and a robot that grabs the wrong item has a genuinely expensive problem. Difficulty does not predict it either. Some very hard things are exposed. Many easy things are not. So where does the work go if the profession does not disappear? Mostly it moves to the edges of the automated task, and it takes 4 shapes. Checking. Somebody decides whether the output is good enough to use, which sounds like less work than doing it and often is, though not always by as much as promised. Specifying. Somebody works out precisely what should be produced, which used to be bundled invisibly into producing it. This turns out to be the harder half more often than anyone expected. Exceptions. The cases that do not fit are still yours, and they are now the whole of your day rather than 1 in 20, which is a different and more tiring job than the one you had. And accountability. Somebody's name goes on it. That has not moved at all, and there is no sign that it will. Translation shows the whole pattern in one picture. The job did not vanish. It turned into post-editing, the machine drafts, a person fixes. But the rate is per word of a draft rather than per word written, and the work is now correcting someone else's choices rather than making your own, which most translators will tell you is less satisfying even when it pays similarly. That is the honest shape of it, not disappearance. Reconfiguration into work that is sometimes better, often narrower, and usually valued differently. And I want to be careful here, because there is a comfortable version of this argument that I do not believe. The comfortable version says tasks get automated, people move up to higher value work, everything is fine. 2 things are wrong with it. The first is that moving up is not automatic and not free. It assumes the higher value work exists in the same quantity, in the same place, and that you can reach it from where you are standing. Sometimes all 3 hold. Often one of them does not. The second is arithmetic. If a task was 60% of a role and it goes, the remaining 40% does not stay a whole job for the same number of people. The profession survives. The headcount need not. That is the real mechanism behind most of what gets reported as a job disappearing, and it is why the profession level list misses it entirely. The job title is still there in the org chart, just fewer times. There is one more consequence that I am going to name and then leave alone, because it deserves its own hour. The tasks that are most exposed, self-contained, high volume, cheap to check, are disproportionately the tasks we give to people who are new. That is not a coincidence. It is the same 3 properties, which raises a question about how anyone becomes experienced, and that is a whole episode of its own. So what do you actually do with this? Stop asking whether your profession is on the list. Spend an hour writing down what you did last week as tasks, in the plainest terms you can manage, and put the time next to each one. Then run the 3 properties on each. Does it arrive self-contained, or does it need things only you know? Does it repeat at volume, or is it every few months? If it were done badly, would it cost much, and would anyone notice quickly? The ones with all 3 are exposed, and roughly on a timescale set by how much volume they carry. The ones missing the third are the safest, and that is worth knowing because it is not the ones you would guess. This is not reassurance. For some of you, the honest result of that hour is that most of your week has all 3 properties, and that is worth knowing early rather than late. It is simply a better instrument than a list of professions written by someone who has never done any of them. The technology is not coming for your job title. It is coming for particular hours in your week, and which hours it takes has almost nothing to do with what you are called. Everyone gave you the headline. Here's the long version.